Hello. It is Saturday, February 26th, 2022. And like many people, I'm feeling pretty powerless about my ability to affect the state of world affairs. Obviously, the Ukraine has been on my mind a lot lately, as it has with most of the world. And I pulled from my bookshelf a collection of folktales that I picked up many, many years ago from a used bookstore, a 1960s collection that it actually was thrown out by my younger sister's elementary school, but I believe made its way to a used bookstore where I picked it up. And the thing about this book that's been particularly on my mind, even though it's really just a collection of children's stories, is how important they were to the translator, Marie Halun Bloch, a writer and translator who grew up in the Ukraine and in the 1960s put out this volume because she really wanted to share the stories that related to her heritage. She wanted to be as authentic as possible with her translation, so she went directly to the folklore archives, the work of ethnographers like Ivan Rudchenko, a 19th century ethnographer and folklorist who worked in the Ukraine, as well as collecting a few stories that were recorded by Marie Lukiyanenko. If I mispronounce any words, I am sincerely apologetic. And these were works that were collected verbatim from ordinary people living in the Ukraine in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And then Marie Bloch translated these stories as close to word for word as she could. And it was because she felt that these stories were worth sharing. She grew up hearing the stories that many Westerners hear regarding Little Red Riding Hood and Hansel and Gretel and those famous collections of the Grimms and others. But she felt that these stories deserved a place amongst them. And I've picked out a couple of my favorites from this collection that are also her favorites as well, as she mentions in her translator notes. And I also want to just share her dedication. It's to the memory of Maria Polenska Zeshala, who passed down to me my Ukrainian heritage, and to American readers with whom I gladly share it. So, folklore and folk tales are undervalued in terms of a way of sharing our cultural heritage and values. And there's something that has a deep, resonating significance. And I don't know how much children growing up in the Ukraine today hear these stories, but I know I certainly didn't hear them growing up in the United States. The first of these stories is called Pan Kotsky. A cat came running out of a village, and a little fox out of a wood, and so they met. The fox looked at the cat and said, "As long as I've lived in the woods, I've never laid eyes on such an animal. Who are you?" "I am Pan Kotsky," replied the cat. "And what sort of creature is Pan Kotsky?" the fox asked. "I am the most frightful animal in the woods," said the cat. "I tear to pieces whomever I please." "Well, marry me," said the fox. "I have a nice house and garden." The cat agreed, and went to live with the fox. They stayed together a week, and another, and the cat never crawled out of the fox's house. Whatever the fox hunted down, she brought to the cat to eat. One day the rabbit met the fox and said to her, "Little cousin fox, I'm coming to your house to woo you." But the fox said to him, "Pan Kotsky is at my house now, and he'll tear you to pieces." The rabbit told the wolf, the bear, and then the wild boar about Pan Kotsky. They met and began to scheme how they might catch a glimpse of him. Finally they said, "We'll prepare a dinner and invite the fox and her Pan Kotsky." So they began to talk over who was to go after what. The wolf said, "I'll go after meat to put in the borscht." And the wild boar said, "I'll go after beets and potatoes." The bear said, "I'll bring honey for a bite before dinner." The rabbit said, "And I cabbage." So they brought everything and started to cook the meal. When it was cooked, they began to talk over who was to invite Pan Kotsky to the dinner. The bear said, "I wouldn't be able to run fast enough should it come to fleeing him." And the wild boar said, "I too am too slow." The wolf said, "I'm already old and a little blind." Only the rabbit was fit for the task. Away he ran to the fox's lair. The fox noticed that the rabbit was standing on his 2 hind paws near the hut. So she ran out and asked him, "And what have you come for?" The rabbit said, "The wolf, the bear, and the wild boar beg, and I beg, that you come to us for dinner with your Pan Kotsky." The fox said, "I'll come with him, but you must all hide, for he will tear you to pieces." The rabbit ran back to the others and announced, "Hide! The fox said, for when Pan Kotsky comes, he'll tear us to pieces."
"But did you tell them to bring their own spoons?" the bear asked.
"Oh, woe is me," said the rabbit. "I quite forgot." And off he ran again. He stole up to the fox's window, shouted, "Bring spoons!" and scampered off. When he had run back to the other animals, they all began to hide. The wild boar hid himself under the table, all but his tail. The bear climbed an oak tree, and the wolf and the rabbit hid under a log. Then the fox came, leading Pan Kotsky. She led him to the table. When the cat saw the heap of food, he jumped upon the table and began to eat, crying out, "Meow! Meow!" The other animals thought that he was saying, "More! More!" "Just listen," they marveled each to himself. "He's such a little thing, yet all by himself he's eating up that dinner, which we prepared for all of us, and wants still more." When the cat had eaten his fill, he stretched out on the table. Underneath it, a mosquito bit the wild boar's tail, and the boar flicked it. The cat, thinking it was a mouse, leaped down and sank his claws into the boar's tail. The boar jumped up in terror, ran, and struck his snout against the oak tree. The cat became frightened and leaped onto the oak, where the bear was sitting. The bear jumped down upon the log where the wolf and the rabbit were hiding. Then they all took to their heels and fled in 4 directions. Afterwards, they came together and talked. All but the rabbit, who had run off, who knows where, and had not yet returned. The wild boar said, "Well, that was a narrow escape. He grabbed me by the tail and whacked my head against the oak." And the bear said, "He seized me by the fur and hurled me from the tree." And the wolf said, "He jumped on me as I was lying under the log, and he took that log and thumped it down on my back. Oh, my back still hurts." As for Pan Kotsky, he sat in the oak tree for a long time, scared out of his wits, until at last the fox managed to coax him down. Now, there is, of course, a wealth of storytelling traditions that come from the Ukraine, and this is just a small selection of them. And a commonality to these tales that were collected is that they are all based around funny animal stories. Lots of clever or not so clever animals engaging in various antics, a lot of them having to do with food. And a lot of them, having to do with ideas of being frightened, of ferocity, which I think tells you a lot about the Ukrainian people. This next story is called The Spiteful Nanny Goat. There once lived a man and wife. One day the man rode off to the fair and bought a goat. When he had brought it home, he sent his older son to pasture it. The lad tended the goat all the day, and in the evening drove it homeward. When he reached the yard, there at the gates stood the old man in red boots and holding a stick. "My dear little nanny goat, my pretty little nanny goat," the old man said, "have you drunk? Have you eaten?" "No, Grandad," the goat said, "I did not drink, nor did I eat. I snatched some leaves of maple as I ran across the bridge and sipped a drop of water as I ran across the dam. Only that much did I drink, only that much did I eat." So the old man seized his son and gave him a thrashing. The next day he sent his younger son to pasture the goat. In the evening, as the lad was driving the goat through the gates, there stood the old man in his red boots, holding a stick. The old man said, "My pretty little nanny goat, have you drunk? Have you eaten?" "No, Grandad, I did not drink, nor did I eat. I snatched some leaves of maple as I ran across the bridge, and sipped a drop of water as I ran across the dam. Only that much did I drink, only that much did I eat." So the old man gave his younger son a thrashing. The third day he sent his wife to pasture the goat. She pastured it all the day, and in the evening drove it toward the farmyard. The old man was already standing at the gates in his red boots and holding a stick. He asked, "My pretty little nanny goat, my dear little nanny goat, have you drunk? Have you eaten?" "No, Grandad, I did not drink, nor did I eat. I snatched some leaves of maple as I ran across the bridge, and sipped a drop of water as I ran across the dam. Only that much did I drink, only that much did I eat." So the old man gave the old woman a thrashing too. The fourth day, the old man himself took the goat to pasture, and in the evening, as soon as he had driven the goat into the road homeward, he himself went ahead and took his stand at the gates. There he stood in his red boots, and he asked, "My pretty little nanny goat, my dear little nanny goat, have you drunk? Have you eaten?" "No, Grandad, I did not drink, nor did I eat. I snatched some leaves of maple as I ran across the bridge, and sipped a drop of water as I ran across the dam. Only that much did I drink, only that much did I eat." Well, with that the old man flew into a rage. He went to the blacksmith to have his knife tempered and sharpened that he might kill the goat. But in the meantime, the goat took to her heels and ran off to the woods. She skipped into a fox's house, jumped up on the stove, and said, "I'm a spiteful nanny goat, clothed in shabby wool, and bought for a mere 3 coins. I'll stamp you with my feet, toss you with my horns, sweep you outdoors with my tail, then trample you beneath my hooves." The little fox had never seen nor heard of such an animal. She became frightened and ran out of the hut, and she sat down under an oak tree and wept. Along came a wolf. The little fox cried, and she begged, saying, "Dear brother wolf, there's a strange and savage beast in my house. Drive it out for me." The wolf stepped into the house and said, "Who is here in the fox's house?" The goat said, "I'm a spiteful nanny goat, clothed in shabby wool, and bought for a mere 3 coins. I'll stamp you with my feet, toss you
toss you with my horns, sweep you outdoors with my tail, then trample you beneath my hooves.
The wolf became frightened and ran out of the hut. So again the fox sat under the oak tree and wept. Along came a lion. The fox said to him, "Dear brother lion, there's a strange and savage beast in my house. Drive it out for me." So the lion went into the house and asked,
"Who is here in the fox's hut?"
The goat said,
"I'm a spiteful nanny goat, clothed in shabby wool, and bought for a mere 3 coins. I'll stamp you with my feet, toss you with my horns, sweep you outdoors with my tail, then trample you beneath my hoofs."
The lion, too, became frightened and ran out. Again the fox said, and sat under the oak tree and wept. Along came a cock. The fox said, "Dear brother Chanticleer, there's a strange and savage beast in my house. Drive it out for me." So the cock went into the house, flapped his wings, and crowed,
"Coo-coo, cuckoo! I strut on legs and handsome boots and carry a sharp scythe. So climb down from that stove, old goat, or off comes your hide."
The goat became so frightened that she fell to the floor and was killed. And then the cock came to live with the little fox, and they lived long, and they lived prosperously together. So, a lot of similarities between this tale and the previous one in terms of having this mysterious animal that other animals, larger, more ferocious animals, are frightened of. But it's so much about that attitude, that presentation of strength that you can see as being valued. And what happens in this tale is, of course, the rooster, who has an even greater presentation of strength, is the one who wins out. This one, of course, has the common folkloric trope of repetition. And that's because these were stories that were originally meant to be read aloud. And it makes it easier to remember. It's easier to kind of get your audience to recall the sequence of events when you've got that patterned repetition that's going on. I do love the details that are in both this story and the other one. The little rabbit that ran out to remind them to bring spoons to the dinner party, even though it was terrified. And just that detail of the man wearing his red boots waiting for the goat to come home. Another just kind of interesting commonality between both of these stories are these mix-matched pairings, where you've got the fox and the cat that are living together, and at the end of this one, the fox and the rooster, which seems like a pretty questionable choice for the rooster. But then we also had the rabbit in the earlier story saying that he wanted to woo or marry the fox from that story. And I think this, shows this kind of willingness to embrace boldness more than anything else, and that the nature of these animals matters less than the attitudes that they are going to present. I'm going to share just one last story with you from this collection. It is called Circo. In a farmyard, there once lived a dog named Circo. So long as he was young and healthy, his master fed him. But when he became old and toothless, the master turned him out of the yard. The dog went into the forest, lay down under an oak tree, and gave himself up to die. Along came a wolf, and he asked, "Why are you lying here, dog?"
"I came to die," the dog replied. "So long as I was healthy, I served the master faithfully. But now that I have grown old, they've turned me out of the farmyard to die of hunger."
"If you like," said the wolf, "I'll teach you how to win back your master's favor. Only afterwards, don't forget about me."
"Teach me," the dog said, "and I'll repay you."
"Listen then," the wolf said. "Soon harvesting will begin. Your master and his wife will go to the fields and will take their infant with them. While the child lies in the shade of a sack of grain, they will reap. I'll sneak up, seize the child, and carry it off to the woods. But you jump across my path, take away the child, and bring it to its parents. Thus they will prize you again." The dog thanked the wolf and began waiting for harvest time, though he barely kept from starving. Somehow he lived through the lean days. Then the time for harvest came, and everything happened just as the wolf said. The master and his wife went into the fields and took the child with them. They placed the child underneath a little bush and themselves began to reap. The wolf sneaked up, seized the child, and carried it away across the fields. The master and mistress saw and began to shout and run after him. But how is it possible for them to catch up with a wolf? The wolf had already reached the wood when Circo jumped out across his path and rushed for him. When he leaped upon the wolf dropped the child and rushed for Circo. They rolled on the ground, pretending to bite each other, and then the wolf broke loose and made a dash for the woods. Circo picked up the child and carried it to the master. What outcries of tears, what babble and joy! "See," the wife said, "I told you that Circo is still a good dog. You didn't listen to me, but turned him out. Yet he overpowered the wolf and rescued the child from him. Now I won't allow Circo to be driven away again. To the end of his days I'm going to feed him, even though he grows quite useless." "Good," the master replied. "I myself would not drive him away now." So the dog returned to the farmyard. They fed him well and looked after him, so that he became fat and sleek and regained his strength. But the wolf's lot was different. So long as it was warm, he managed to find prey. But as late autumn drew near, he became hungry and cold. The dog did not forget him, however. Every day he carried a bit of something to the field, a scrap of bread or a bone of some sort. At last the master and mistress finished the threshing and began to prepare for the christening of their child. The dog said to the wolf, "My masters are preparing a christening party. When they have drunk well, I will let you into the house on the sly, and you can eat your fill. Only be sure to keep silent, so they don't discover you by your voice." The wolf promised to hold his tongue. In the evening, he approached the house, and when the people opened the door into the corridor to cool off a bit in the fresh air, Circo led the wolf into the house and settled him under the table. Then he began to bring him food. The house was full of people, and no one noticed what Circo was doing. The wolf ate his fill, until he could not stuff another bite. Then he said to Circo, "I'm thirsty. Bring me what the people are drinking." Circo brought a bottle of wine under the table. When the wolf had drunk it up, how muddled he was. "Oh, I can't restrain myself," he said to the dog. "I'm going to sing." "Don't sing," said the dog. "There will be trouble." The wolf held back, and then suddenly burst into a howl. Hullabaloo broke out in the cottage. "Beat the wolf!" everyone shouted, snatching at sticks and pokers. Circo snarled and rushed under the table. He leaped upon the wolf's back, caught him by the neck in his teeth as if to bite him, and at the same time pushed him toward the door. The master said, "Don't beat the wolf, or you'll kill my dog. Never fear, Circo knows what to do." The guests fell back, and Circo worked the wolf towards the door, then into the courtyard and out into the fields. he drew the wolf right into the woods. Then Sirko said, "You did me a kindness. Now I have done you one." And so they parted. When Sirko returned to the cottage, they treated him to delicacies and praised him for overpowering the wolf. And so he lived happily till his death. So, again, an animal-based story. And one that has this fantastic recognition of the difficulties of life. The dog is turned out when he's no longer useful, which is, I think, a very real human fear that we all have, that idea of growing weak, growing useless, and wanting to be loved and valued and taken care of. But also that recognition of the leanness of the wolf as he goes hungry. That food can sometimes be scarce. That there can be dangerous predators around. But more than anything, it's a story about recognizing the obligations that we have to one another. The wolf doesn't have to help Sirko at the beginning, but he offers to. And is rewarded by Sirko through food. And when the family thinks that Sirko has done them a great honor by protecting them and their child, they treat him well. So there is that idea of reciprocity, and that idea that even though times can be hard and that times can be scary, we can still look after one another and help one another. Thank you. I hope that you enjoyed these traditional Ukrainian folktales.